Larian's on a bit of a high since releasing Baldur's Gate 3, so let's run through some important answers from the dev Ask Me Anything on Reddit about their up-and-coming game, Divinity. There's a lot of nuggets of information here that I think you'll be interested in. Starting with this, anything in particular you're excited for players to get to experience in this game? And Sven, the game director, said, "There's a lot we prefer to show and not tell. That said, Lizard romance seems like it's going to be popular." Now, it seems like the rules with any new Larian title is we get some weird romance scene that completely breaks the internet. Though we already saw a human girl riding a lizard in the trailer, so I think that Sven is hinting at something that really surprises us. Let's move on to what you all clicked on this video for. Will big naturals be available without mods in Divinity? And they say, "I'll do what I can." And thank you, mod author Maybe Adam, for your service. Now, I'll put the link up there. This is the mod in question. Now, this is clearly a joke, but I hope there are different body types in the game. Having the same body type for all female and all male characters was not the most immersive thing. Rigging a feminine body with, those proportions can be difficult. Rigging a feminine body with big hips and big jugs can be difficult, understandably, but they have the budget now, so who knows? It's completely the same for the male bodies. There needs to be some variance. But I know there are more important things to discuss, and that is coming up now. With each game, you've improved in writing a story and narrative for your games. What are some of the things that you would like to improve narrative-wise compared to your previous entries? Companion relationships, firstly, to have more interaction between companions, not just with more and better banter, but to have them develop deeper relationships with each other, just as they do with players. Secondly, to ramp up player friendship and romances more subtly so relationship building feels natural. Another question in a similar vein, one of the criticisms of Baldur's Gate 3's writing is that the party members don't have as much relationship between each other or talk to each other as much as other RPGs. Is this something you're considering when creating Divinity? Yeah, the goal is to have more interactions between party members, and it won't always just be talking. Now, banter between companions is like audible gold. It's why I feel the relationships were so strong in the Mass Effect series, and why there are mods that increase the banter amount, bring back elevated conversations, or even bring them into the Mako. Baldur's Gate 3 had a minimal amount of banter between companions, I feel, especially for such a large game, so I'm glad that they're changing this. Though when it comes to relationships and friendships, I really hope they don't overcompensate and ramp it up too slowly. It's nice to be able to get into a relationship early on in the adventure if you choose, so you can see how things develop, but overall, I'm happy they're looking at these two narrative aspects. Though I am excited to see what won't always be talking means. Using Mass Effect again as an example, like when Jack attacks Miranda. In Baldur's Gate 3, I really enjoyed the aspect of ending the day and going into the camp to interact with your companions, not so much for refilling the spell slots, same with me. Will there be something similar in Divinity? Well, we give you space to build your relationships with the companions. I won't go into too much detail here, and yes, you won't have to refill any spell slots. The fact they aren't going into detail means there is more to it than just returning to camps to interact with your companions. There'll most likely be another feature or other ways to interact, which is great because having to return just to check that there isn't some other conversation waiting for you that you might miss can get tedious to some, myself included, though I am ecstatic that there's no more spell slots. That was a symptom of following a Dungeons & Dragons rule set, and although it was groundbreaking for the time, the system is archaic as hell now and really limits creativity. Baldur's Gate 3 had a fantastic romance that lasted through most of the 3 acts. Are you doubling down on this, and is there an even greater focus on it? When we're designing and writing the romances, the goal is to make them memorable and have them feel as a natural part of the character's personality and relationship with the player. That means we discover the way to tell romances as we develop the companions and their stories, alongside the character artists, cinematic artists, animators, performance directors, actors, and other developers. I hope we'll manage to push deeper into depth and complexity of romance, love, and some other, not always positive, emotions, and I'm very excited to see what our cinematics team cook up. So, a very long-winded way of saying they want these relationships to feel natural. Adding to the other point just mentioned, they're most likely going to make them harder to start, but attempt to make them feel more rewarding in the end and more natural. What is the writing process like in terms of planning and accommodating players who like to do quests out of order or find little hidden details? The writing process is to embrace the chaos, to encourage the chaos, to be one with the chaos. The first thing we tend to do when playtesting our own situations is to run them out of sequence, break them in every conceivable way, and see how far we can push the boundaries of what is possible. The greatest joy I get is seeing somebody go so far off the beaten path that they assume they've lost track of them, and then they stumble across something that we put there just for them. Now, I think it goes without saying that Larian are going to put as many Easter eggs as possible so keen explorers can break the game and be the first to brag about it on socials. What are some mods that you've seen for Baldur's Gate 3 that have made you say, we should have thought of that, or we definitely have to include that next time around? Car Wild Shape. We're taking notes on all the UI mods for sure. The UI team worked very hard to bring the complexity of an open world D&D adventure to video game format, but we had more improvements in mind that we just couldn't cram into our releases. Happy we managed to make UI moddable in the first place. Love all the mods regarding player appearance. Lots of creative ideas in terms of combining outfits, hairstyles and whatnot. Our character team is always looking at those and we take note at what our community wants. So first, UI is going to be improved. Bless Baldur's Gate 3, but the UI was one of my least favorite things about it. Information should be digestible at a glance and easy to use. Now, the art director has taken notice of the player appearance mods. Hopefully that means they noticed all the improvements and not just the different hair outfits and hats. Will the looting system be random and level dependent like most items in Divinity Original Sin 1 and 2? Or will there be more handcrafted items like in Baldur's Gate 3? The Baldur's Gate 3 approach of handcrafting every magical item worked well, and something we've always wanted to do for DOS 2. Something we realized when working on randomized loot for DOS 1 and DOS 2 is that fully random loot is frequently confusing. So we added more and more rules and pre-made patterns to make it feel more intentional. In the end, randomization did not save us much time. Handcrafted loot always feels more balanced and intentional. It's just the nature of it. Games like Diablo 4 still handcraft at the high end, even though those have some randomization still. A fully random loot system is something I end up hating, so I am at least glad to see this. My only issue with handcrafting is the quantity. Will we just be seeing the same small handful of items? Hopefully not. How will you handle the canon issues Divinity Original Sin 2 introduced? It basically acted as a soft retcon of the series. Will the new Divinity game continue with the new lore, or will you try to reconcile it with the previous titles? It's in the same continuity, but it's a standalone story. Long-term Divinity fans will find lots of familiar things, but it's never just fan service. It has to serve the story we're telling. The Divinity universe is full of weird and wonderful characters, and I'm really excited to be part of that legacy. Now, the more I listen to devs, the more I'm convinced that you don't need to have played Divinity Original Sin 1, so if you're looking to prepare yourself for this game, Original Sin 2 is probably all you'll want to play, if any at all, considering that Divinity is going to be its own contained story. Here's an example. I bet many of you haven't even played Baldur's Gate 1 or 2. Did it matter? Okay, so can you tell us about new mechanics in Divinity that you're most proud of? There was something that bothered me when I explored the starting areas of DOS 1 and 2 and Baldur's Gate 3. It stares you right in the face if you think about it. In Divinity, I can finally do the thing I wanted to do in every previous game. I honestly have no idea what this is. Maybe fishing, swimming even. Since you always seem to start near water, it has to be something like that. Or maybe this is just a little joke from the devs. Tonally speaking, how different will the new Divinity be from Divinity Original Sin 2? Love you guys, by the way. It's more grounded, and you might have picked up some folk horror vibes in our trailer, but with the games the size of DOS 2 and Divinity, there are lots of tonal variations as you move through the world and meet new characters. I hope it will make you laugh, frighten you, shock you, and delight you. And then Adam, the game director, admits that that was his Professor Loud disguise. I won't know the story behind that name, but we will most likely experience a range of tones from dark to humorous. It's the nature of games this size, and it depends on the area, the quests, and the characters with you. What couldn't you do in BG3 and DOS2 that you'll be able to do in the upcoming Divinity? We figured out ways to burn things that we could never burn before. We still give you something to put out the fires though, no worries. Okay, yes, in my previous video, the devs talked about the combat system having tons of different moving parts working together for you guys to solve, and burning more seems like one of those things. Spreading oil, lighting things on fire, then using rain to put it out maybe isn't something we're unfamiliar with, but I imagine they're cooking up even more than this. Is Divinity going to be pulling any particular ideas / gameplay concepts from the original titles? Why drop the original Sin title now? There's never been a Divinity, and now that we can finally make the game we've always wanted, we thought it was time to do so. We're taking the opportunity to vastly improve and expand the world building and set a new direction for this series. So it's their chance to be the most ambitious they've been, using that sweet Baldur's Gate money. Will there be co-op planned for release? If so, can you say how many players? Yes, co-op will be available for release. The amount of players playing together will depend on the final party size, but since modding is planned for this project as well, player will be essentially free to extend this. There's no hard limit to the amount of co-op players. Now, I imagine there has to be a limit. The UI can't expand indefinitely, and there will be some limitations connecting so many systems, but it's certainly interesting to hear that we can organize a big group co-op session that will essentially be speedruns due to how much easier the game would be, once of course the modders get their hands on the game. What so far has been your favorite part of making Divinity, and what has been your least favorite part? Least favorite, answering questions about AI. Favorite, all the rest. And then Gabriel says rude. I have to say, I'm tired as hell about the AI discussions. There are people that are just so rabid about it that it's going to swing the other way and AI will run rampant. If you dislike AI use, try not to froth at the mouth at every mention of AI, or you'll become a class of people who are insufferable to listen to. Just look at how many times the same question was asked and answered. Some people just want to make a statement about their own virtue rather than actually wanting to know the answer. Now, wherever you sit on the AI discussion, Divinity will have no use of generative AI. End of discussion. Is Boris back for the music on Divinity? Bobby never left. He's cooking. Okay, Borislav Slavov, for those who don't know, is the composer and music director for Baldur's Gate 3, and he scored some bangers. This is good news, and I'm sure your ears are about to be slapped off harder than during Raphael's final act in Baldur's Gate 3. Will you include any ducks or other new vowel-based NPCs to the game? I'm incredibly inspired by this picture. I have no idea what to think. Are we going to be fighting giant mutant ducks? I don't know. What are the playable races and classes? We aren't ready to talk about that quite yet, but if you rewatch the trailer, you should get some hints on the races. So we have lizards, elves, dwarves, orcs, maybe half orcs, and humans, all based on the trailer, but no doubt we'll have more. Narrative question. One of the problems with branching path narratives or giving the player too much freedom is that it can get a bit messy quite fast and muddy the main narrative and story the game is trying to convey. Considering Divinity will be grander in scope compared to BG3, I imagine there would be more branching narratives and ways to tackle problems. In what way do you try to achieve this, but at the same time mitigate the problem of the narrative falling apart without railroading too much in certain key story beats? And don't forget multiplayer, that makes it even harder. But it is one of the things that we want to get better at with each game we make. We hate railroading and want you to have total freedom, but still experience a compelling narrative. We learned a lot from Baldur's Gate 3 and are now applying those lessons together with a host of new ideas. I mean, Baldur's Gate 3 did a fantastic job, so hopefully they don't feel like they need to rewrite the narrative formula too much, but from what I've seen, they're looking to improve rather than change. The WASD movement mod was one of the most downloaded and beloved mods for Baldur's Gate 3. Will the new Divinity game include native keyboard movement controls right out of the box? No. simple question gets a simple answer. For the life of me, I don't understand why they wouldn't add this. Now, Baldur's Gate 3 being a D&D game had most of the better story and world interactions behind succeeding on rolls and checks, incentivizing character growth and improving stats. This has the drawback of also incentivizing save scumming. Are there any plans to make failing these dialogue/non-combat checks narratively more interesting, a la Disco Elysium, and try to encourage players to accept bad RNG? I try not to save scum in theory, but admittedly usually only let a bad roll go when it feels like there aren't significant consequences, i.e. narratively or reward-wise, that mean I'll be missing out on content I would have wanted. Our ambition is certainly to make failure more interesting. There are already a couple of situations in the game where I think the most exciting and extensive outcomes come from failure, but you'll have to be the judge on how well we do. I love hearing this because I'm a self-confessed save scummer, but it's, to my credit, impossible not to be as a content creator because you sometimes need to see all outcomes. In a normal playthrough though, I would love to see failure as a legitimate and rewarding path. Imagine failing but thinking, oh, damn, maybe I'll stick with this. But I mean, that never happens. In what game does that ever happen? I'd actually like to know, let me know below. So if Larian nails that, I will be impressed. Will Divinity be sticking to the armor/magic armor system found in DOS 1 and DOS 2? Divinity will not keep the magic armor system from DOS 2. There will be ways to protect your characters from harm, but you'll not always have to wait before you can use your fun skills on enemies. We are still cooking a system that makes sure you have to work harder to stunlock solo bosses with level 1 skills, but it won't be tied to damage. This is good to hear, but overall, like I mentioned before, it seems Larian is revamping the combat system and focusing on fun. They want to give you the tools to create an interesting interaction with the world, with your enemies, and in combat in general. How would you describe the difference in tone between DOS 1 and 2, BG3 and Divinity? I'm personally very fond of the humor in both DOS and BG3, whereas the reveal trailer for Divinity set a pretty brutal tone. Not saying it has to be one or the other, but is the balance different this time around? I laughed out loud reviewing a dialogue this morning. I mentioned in the answer to another question that the game of this size needs a lot of tonal diversity. Sometimes the darker situations become funny because of a player's response to them or a companion's commentary. And sometimes the joke backfires and everyone is suddenly on fire. This was metaphorical, but somehow I think it's also literal. Will interactions with NPCs be mocapped like in BG3? One of my favorite things was how every NPC felt unique to interact with. Me too. In fact, we just built 4 new VO performance capture volumes with more in the works. This is fantastic news and makes me want to pry a little. The devs have 6 recording studios inside Larian Studios and will be recording almost full time since they have their actors always there, so it makes sense for them to be mocapping as well, which is going to be great for immersion. Will the game be playable in a more third-person view as opposed to DOS 2's isometric camera? The camera will work very similar to BG3, so a hybrid of top-down and third-person camera. So they're sticking to what they do well. Not everyone likes isometric games, not everyone likes turn-based games, but with Baldur's Gate 3's success, there's clearly a market for it, so I'm glad they aren't listening to very loud, lack of a better term, COD players. In Divinity, lizards are hot, elves are cannibals and weird, dwarfs are seafaring people. Are you planning on giving the orcs a little special twist to differentiate them from the standard fantasy tropes? Without saying which species are in the game, all of them have something unique. This is obviously such a nothing answer as well, because I'm guessing they just can't talk about this stuff. But something unique could be anywhere from a race's history all the way to the bonuses that they get in combat. Come on, Sven, give us more. Will there be mod support? Yes, we will be providing modding tools, but haven't decided yet if this will be for release or not. I do hope they release with mod support. It'll keep the hype around the game going for longer, as modders tend to want to jump on board if something is popular. More modders means more basking in the rewards. Not to say that modders won't jump on if it's released later, but striking while the iron is hot is smart. Do you plan on having Divinity be playable on the Steam Deck? We all love the Steam Deck. Since BG3 was one of the most played games on the platform, we will do our best again to release on the platform. If they didn't find a way to support the Steam Deck, someone else would have. It's easy enough to play these kinds of games on the deck, though for some reason it's still a no to the WASD keyboard support. Look, I'm not a WASD keyboard user, but I understand the frustration. Is there any small spoiler you can give us that will sound completely nonsensical until we play the game? Alligator. So, alligator sex confirmed. Watch out for his chompers. Will there be sex scenes? Does a bear in the woods? Now, did he mean the S word or the F word? That's up to you to decide. Yes, of course there will be sex scenes, but I hope they spice up the visuals a bit more. Not just flat models that use the same body. But still, kudos to them for putting actual nudity in the game. We know how sensitive everyone gets about it. I recently had to censor a completely non-nude butt off YouTube, but gratuitous violence is fun. When you say Divinity 3 will be your biggest game yet, it's not Divinity 3, it's just Divinity. What are we aiming for here? Baldur's Gate took quite some time to complete the story. Are we looking into double that or... Thanks. Also, mad respect to all of you, love you guys. Divinity takes everything we learned from BG3 and DOS2 and improves from there. In regards to BG3, I think the main thing will be more agency and a rule system that was made for video gaming in addition to higher production values. Oh, and some really cool new friends to meet. More agency, more consequences. We don't know ourselves yet how big it will be, we're still making it. So saying it will be bigger than anything else they've done before is the work they're putting into it, not the actual time to complete it. Those are completely different things that aren't mutually exclusive. Though I wouldn't be surprised if it ends up being bigger than Baldur's Gate 3 by default. Will we have full character customization similar to Baldur's Gate 3? We're planning to have an even better one. More colors, more options, more control. Now, this is a given. Larian are famous for role-playing and customizing your character is a large part of that. So, bigger budget means more control. Will Divinity be more cinematic like Baldur's Gate 3 or more in the lines of top-down text like Original Sins 2? We have an incredibly talented team of cinematic artists and animators. I wouldn't be able to hold them back from doing what they do best. This is something else I love to see. Cinematics immerse you further into the world, and if anything, Baldur's Gate 3 could have used some more. Mostly it was just relegated to the start or the end of acts. So bring it on, Larian. Clap my eyes with those sweet cinematics. How much bigger is the dev team for Divinity compared to Baldur's Gate 3? Do you expect Larian Studios to keep growing for each new game, or do you expect a limit sooner or later? Do you prefer a larger game studio focuses on one game at a time or split up work on projects simultaneously? We were 411 people at the end of Baldur's Gate 3 and have around 500 people working on Divinity now. Our teams evolve in function of the games we try to make and what we think the size of the market will be. We grew a lot during Baldur's Gate 3 because we wanted to make a cinematic RPG with loads of choice and consequences, but we also knew there was a market and scaled accordingly. Our growth has slowed down a bit as we have most of the team in place to make a big cinematic RPG, but there are still a few things we didn't do before that we are doing now. I didn't realize they'd grown this large. Larian is absolutely a AAA developer now, and if anything, when they start getting this big, that's when things start going wrong. Let's hope they understand that, and based on what they've said in the past, like understanding you can't middle manage and need to go directly to staff in charge, that gives me hope. Where do you feel the writing lacked in Baldur's Gate 3, and how do you plan to improve it for Divinity? Two things come to mind. One, I like the companions and other characters to feel like a more natural part of the world. I love the BG3 companions, but the nature of the story means that they're mostly displaced strangers in a strange land. Some of them returning home, but they're in unfamiliar territory as the game begins. I'd like to see how far we can push the diversity of companions and their stories even further. Two, I spent a lot of time thinking about the structure. The nature of CRPGs is that there are often several stories happening simultaneously, whether that's a smaller quest alongside the main plot, a developing romance, a conflict between party members, or encounters with an antagonist. I'm focusing on mapping the shapes of the story so that there is pleasing overlap in the narrative patterns. It's the sciencey side of the narrative, but it has a big impact on the writing of individual moments within those structures. Now, I'm glad Adam is thinking about all this, but the actual execution might not be so easy. To make all characters feel a part of the world in an RPG where you're the hero can be hard. Pleasing overlap is actually even harder. Like, how exactly do you map out something which is directed by player agency? I wish him luck. Sounds like a lot of work ahead, especially because a great antagonist makes the game, and conflict really fills the gaps. Now, that's every important answer on the Reddit Ask Me Anything. What do you think? Are you more or less excited for Divinity? I'm personally extremely pumped because, I mean, Larian really doesn't miss, do they? Now, I've tried something different with this video. I thought I'd just turn the camera on and talk. Let me know what you think. Let me know what you think about the game. Really keen for some feedback. Until next time, ciao, friends.